When police arrived at the crime scene, there were no witnesses, no cameras, no suspects, except for one, a dog who refused to leave her side. That dog had been with Florencia during her final moments, and without anyone realizing it, he would become the key to identifying her killer. To understand how this happened, we need to go back to Buenos Aires, to the life Florencia was building before everything ended. Before her name would appear in headlines, Florencia Aranguren was simply a young woman building a life in Buenos Aires, surrounded by art, routine, and her dog. She was born on November 20th, 1993, and from a very young age she was immersed in the world of the arts. She grew up surrounded by painting and drawing, which led her to develop a deep passion for everything connected to artistic expression. Later on, she discovered aerial trapeze and began practicing it regularly. By that time, Florencia was already working as an illustrator and frequently shared her work on social media. She partnered with a well-known tattoo studio, creating illustrations that were later tattooed on clients. She also performed in several aerial trapeze shows, captivating everyone who watched. Eventually, in Argentina's capital, Florencia became part of a circus performance collective coordinated by the aerial trapeze artist Miss Marine Blue. During her shows, she performed high-altitude acrobatics that left audiences breathless. On her social media, she often shared glimpses of her daily life. In one of her posts, she appears with her most loyal companion, a dog named Tronco. Tronco is the Spanish word for log, but it's also a term of endearment for a close friend, a name that suited him perfectly either way, as he was often seen in photos proudly carrying a large wooden log in his mouth. Florencia and Tronco were inseparable. Wherever she went, she made sure to take him with her. No matter how far the journey, Tronco was always by her side. He was her constant companion, her safe haven, and later he would become one of the most important figures in unraveling this case. At a certain point in her life, Florencia decided to move to Europe, more specifically to Spain. She chose the country because of the language, which is the same as in Argentina, the country where she was born. When she turned 31, she wanted to live somewhere else, something that would represent a fresh start in her life. She was looking for a place more connected to nature, a place that to her felt calmer and more serene. During this process of self-discovery, Florencia returned to the American continent and decided to move to Brazil, the largest country in South America. This happened in 2023, and Tronco, her faithful companion, went with her. Brazil was not unfamiliar to Florencia. She had visited the country in the past, specifically the region of Búzios, a well-known tourist peninsula located in the state of Rio de Janeiro. At the time, she visited the country with a friend named Macarena Sanchez, who worked as a tattoo artist. Florencia fell in love with Brazil, and during that visit began to consider the idea of one day living in the tropical country. So her choice was not random, but something she had been thinking about for quite some time. Upon arriving in Brazil, Florencia went to Búzios, the same region she had visited before. In her first days there, she dedicated herself to exploring the area on foot. She walked through every place she could, from beaches to hiking trails, and Tronco was always by her side, clearly enjoying the environment just as much as she was. Everything seemed perfect for Florencia and her dog. She planned to stay in Brazil for a long time. According to sources, on December 5, 2023, Florencia took Tronco to the veterinarian for a routine checkup. She was very attentive to her dog's health, so she regularly took him to the vet to make sure everything was fine. Tronco underwent some tests at the clinic, but the veterinarian asked Florencia to return the following morning so additional exams could be performed. So the next day, December 6, 2023, Florencia left her home early with her dog. It was nearly 7 a.m. The appointment was scheduled for a bit later, but Florencia decided to leave early to enjoy some time and explore the new place where she was living. She headed out with Tronco toward a beach called José Gonçalves, located nearby. This beach is known for being quiet and having very little foot traffic. Security cameras captured Florencia walking down a street heading toward the beach. In the footage, Florencia can be seen wearing a backpack and casual clothes, walking with her dog toward a trail that connected the street to the beach. Around 8 a.m., a local resident passing through the same area noticed a strange shape in the sand along the trail and decided to approach to see what it was. At first, the resident thought it might be trash washed in by the tide, but he soon came across something horrifying. It was Florencia's body, covered in blood, with Tronco beside her, completely still, except for his heavy breathing and stained with blood. The resident immediately contacted the authorities through an anonymous report. Within minutes, a police team arrived at the scene. They secured the entire area and confirmed that a homicide had taken place there. A forensic investigation was carried out in search of evidence, along with a review of security camera footage from the neighborhood. Throughout all of this, Tronco remained motionless beside Florencia. He refused to move away from her body and growled at anyone who tried to approach. While reviewing the neighborhood's security camera footage, police observed that about 20 minutes after Florencia passed through the street leading to the trail, a man riding a bicycle and wearing a cap passed through the same location. To the police, this man could be an important witness in the case since, given the timing of his presence in the area, he likely had seen something that could help the investigation. The focus then shifted to identifying and locating him, a task the police carried out quickly. The man seen in the footage was identified as Carlos José de França, who was 32 years old at the time. Soon after, police managed to locate him at a nearby guest house. Carlos José had been living at that guest house for about 3 months and worked informally on the beach, selling items to tourists. Officers spoke with him and asked that he accompany them to the crime scene to determine whether he had witnessed anything relevant. Up to that point, Carlos José was treated solely as a potential witness who might help solve the crime. However, when he arrived at the location where Florencia's body lay, with Tronco beside her, the dog became extremely agitated. Tronco had already been behaving aggressively toward anyone who tried to approach Florencia's body, but when he saw Carlos José, his reaction intensified. The dog began barking and growling at the man with much greater force. At one point, Tronco attempted to bite him and had to be restrained by the officers holding his leash. Witnessing this reaction, the officers knew this wasn't just typical canine aggression. It was a recognition. Why had the dog become even more aggressive upon seeing Carlos José? Tronco's behavior immediately raised the officers' suspicions about the man. To the officers, this was interpreted as a form of recognition of the attacker by scent, presence, or even movement. At that point, Carlos José began to be treated as a suspect, and when police checked his records, they were met with an unpleasant surprise. The man was considered highly dangerous and had already committed an extremely serious crime in 2009 in another state of Brazil. At the time, Carlos José was living in the state of Pernambuco in northeastern Brazil when, in March 2009, he approached a 15-year-old girl and 2 of her friends who were returning home from school. He was armed with a revolver and demanded the girls' belongings. The victims handed over their cell phones but said they had no money. Dissatisfied with what he obtained, Carlos José decided he wanted more. He then ordered 2 of the 3 teenagers to leave. He took the remaining girl to a more isolated, remote area where he subjected her to a horrific ordeal. Carlos José was arrested just a few days after committing this senseless act against the teenager. He was convicted in 2014 and sentenced to 15 years and 6 months in prison. After starting his time behind bars in high security, he transitioned to minimum security and was eventually granted parole. He then decided to move from Pernambuco to the state of Rio de Janeiro, settling in Búzios and surviving by doing informal work on the beach. After gathering all this information about Carlos José's life, the police decided to keep him in custody. A police team was sent to the guest house where he was staying to search his room. During the search, officers found, inside a bucket filled with water, clothes belonging to Carlos José stained with blood. These were the same clothes he was wearing when he was captured on the security camera footage on the street Florencia walked through, about 20 minutes before he passed by the same location. It was clear that he was trying to remove blood traces from his clothing. The items were immediately sent to the medical examiner's office for analysis, with the goal of confirming whether the genetic material belonged to Florencia. Florencia's body was also taken to the Forensic Medical Institute for an autopsy, and Tronco had to be restrained by authorities, as he refused to let anyone approach. Tronco was placed under the care of people involved in animal welfare while the investigation continued. Tony Russo, an animal rights advocate in Búzios, became responsible for the dog. He was called by the authorities to the crime scene and informed of what had happened. Tony, along with his team, managed to rescue and calm Tronco thanks to their experience handling animals under stress. The protector even posted a video on his social media in which he appears with a dog and explains the whole situation. During Florencia's autopsy, approximately 18 stab wounds caused by a sharp object, most likely a knife, were identified. There were wounds to her neck, the back of her neck, and her chest, as well as defensive injuries on her hands, indicating that she tried to fight back. Hair strands were also found under her fingernails. They were collected and sent for analysis to determine whether they were compatible with Carlos José. The cause of death was severe hemorrhaging resulting from the serious injuries. Carlos José was taken to the police station and later transferred to a state prison. During the forensic examination conducted on him, authorities noticed several scratches on his body, injuries that were likely inflicted by Florencia while she was trying to defend herself. The crime had a major impact across Brazil, especially because Carlos José, a highly dangerous criminal who had already been convicted of a serious crime, was free and living a normal life. The day after the crime, Florencia's friend Macarena Sanchez identified her body at the Forensic Medical Institute. Florencia's family was devastated and traveled from Argentina to Brazil as soon as they learned what had happened. The victim's sister, Florencia Aranguren, took custody of Tronco, who was around 10 years old at the time. According to sources, due to the high cost of transporting Florencia's body, the family chose to have her cremated in Brazil and later return her ashes to Argentina. Florencia's wake took place on December 9th in the city of Rio de Janeiro and was attended by a few family members and friends who were in Brazil. Tronco, Florencia's loyal and inseparable companion, was also present at the ceremony. He stayed beside the coffin throughout the entire wake in a deeply emotional moment that symbolized the animal's loyalty after having already remained by her body at the crime scene. After the wake, Florencia's body was cremated, and her ashes were placed in an urn that was later taken by her family to Buenos Aires, Argentina. Meanwhile, Rio de Janeiro police continued their investigation in order to conclude the inquiry and bring Carlos José to justice. According to authorities, the man targeted Florencia with the intent to physically overpower and violate her. He allegedly took advantage of the fact that there were no people on the trail that day who could stop or witness the crime. However, Florencia resisted, and as a result, he decided to kill her and then dragged her body to a part of the trail that was harder to see. According to investigators, Tronco's behavior played a crucial role in identifying the person responsible for the crime. Since the moment of his arrest, Carlos José has denied any involvement in Florencia's death. However, the evidence against him was overwhelming. Forensic tests confirmed that the blood found on the clothes inside the bucket of water belonged to the victim. In addition, DNA extracted from the skin found under Florencia's fingernails matched his DNA. This alone would have been enough to secure a conviction, but the police presented further evidence, including security camera footage showing him following the same path as the victim and Tronco's behavior, as the dog became extremely aggressive upon seeing him. In June 2024, state prosecutors in Rio de Janeiro formally indicted Carlos José de França on first-degree murder charges. The case was scheduled for a jury trial, reflecting the severity of the crime and the public outrage surrounding it. Carlos José de França's trial began on April 9, 2025. In total, 10 witnesses testified, including the resident who found the body, Florencia's sister, the defendant's wife, residents of the guest house where he lived, and, exceptionally, Tronco was brought into the courtroom to reinforce evidence of his prior reaction to the suspect. Throughout the trial, the defendant vehemently denied committing the crime. Florencia's family followed the proceedings virtually from Argentina. In the end, Carlos José de França was found guilty of the murder of Florencia. He was sentenced to 33 years in prison and was also ordered to pay approximately $9,500 in restitution to the victim's family. Subsequently, his defense filed an appeal citing irregularities in the trial. The Rio de Janeiro State Court partially upheld the appeal and reduced his sentence to 19 years and 2 months in maximum security. Carlos José is currently imprisoned in a state prison in Rio de Janeiro. His defense has filed another appeal which has not yet been reviewed. This appeal seeks to completely overturn the sentence, claiming irregularities in the trial. The latest reports about Tronco indicate that he is being cared for by Florencia's family. Sometimes he cries and paces back and forth as if searching for his owner. He spent 10 years by her side, and Tronco will never forget her. Well, folks, that's it. Thank you very much for watching until the end. I'll stop here for now. A big hug, and I see you next time.